that. Let's try that one more time.
It's just me tonight here at the house. Me and Chewy, So I got one child, The boys are at Nana's. Jesse is visiting a friend, and Kathy is still at work. Kathy works really late on Mondays and Tuesdays so that she can only work 4 days a week. So
when I worked at Washington Mutual, and this is 20 years ago, which doesn't seem right, but it was, they gave us the option of flex schedules. And so I did, they called it 9/9s. And but it really was, I worked a 5-day week, and I worked 8.5-hour days. And then the next week I worked 8.5-hour days for 4 days. And then I got every other Friday off.
Oh, see, that would be nice.
Yeah, it was great having a 3-day weekend. And that Friday I had off was the Friday that we came down to Portland for Marissa weekends. So.
Oh yeah, see,
and
it's like a little vacation.
It is, yeah. I think having something to look forward to. I just remember going to Catholic school, and when I knew that we had like a half day, it was basically a vacation day. It just felt good because the teachers really, their hearts weren't in it. The classes were only like 20 minutes long. They changed it so the classes were like only 20, 25 minutes long. And it's like, why are we fooling ourselves here? Nothing.
I've always thought about that. Yeah. Especially at the end of the school year. It's like everybody knows you guys are just milking the time because you have to. Let's play a movie today. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Love that. And if and as an adult now, I look at that and go, yeah, man, I'm in charge of making sure stuff gets done. Y'all look smart to me. Let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, and I felt that way just about every class except for religion. That was the class where I'm like, I lived to debate whichever brother happened to be teaching that class. And sometimes I would tick them off. But
I'm sure you wouldn't do that.
Oh, I did, because I would just debate things to debate them. But at the end, they were like, they enjoyed it because they knew that I actually cared about it, as opposed to a lot of kids who were just like this. I don't know.
Yeah.
By the way, do you think it lacks integrity for me that I sold my my notes from religion class to other kids in the class so they had good notes to study from?
No.
Cool.
I don't think so.
I don't have a lot of guilt over that. It's actually the sin there would be pride. I took really good notes.
Well, yes. Yeah. There could be a pride issue, but you're helping them as long as the teacher is fine with it.
Oh, was he supposed to know?
Yeah, even if he doesn't. If he doesn't, okay. I mean, you're not giving them the answers to the test. You're just helping them study.
That's true. It'd be like 30 pages of handwritten notes.
Wow.
Or something like that. Didn't do them any good.
No, it's just helping them study. What's the real difference between that and sitting down with them and let's study for the test?
That would have been better because my guess is they didn't know what they were reading. I took really good notes, but
you only partially helped them.
Right. Really what I did is I set them up for failure so that I could really shine and get the Outstanding Religion Student Award. That's really what I was gunning for.
Gotcha.
That's pretty pathetic, isn't it? It's just a little pathetic. All right. Well, you had an ambitious sermon this week.
I did.
Yeah, and that's not a knock or anything, but it was ambitious, and now we have the opportunity to dig in a bit more on it. So, what's your elevator pitch this week?
I'm
sorry, I gotta laugh because you couldn't just jump right into it because there was so much.
Right. Well, and I don't think about that. I know that question's coming, but I don't think about it ahead of time. So what I did is I'm just thinking through my sermon again. What pieces do I want to put in there? The subject was the second advent, the return of Jesus. The text is Matthew 24:25. It's the question that's asked in verse 3 of 24, and there's so many details people want to put in to what's going to happen, and I want to simplify it for people to say, here, there's a couple of pieces that are really just clear. One is things are going to get bad. They're going to get bad. There's going to be a lot of spiritual dangers. There's going to be a lot of upheaval, and then Jesus is going to come back, and there it'll be clear, it'll be glorious. He'll gather his people together. There will be a resurrection. There will be a judgment, and there will be the new heavens, the new, and people will go into eternity in their final condition that they will be in. Those are the pieces we can be absolutely all Orthodox Christians believe. All. No one will debate those pieces. Things get bad. Jesus comes back. Resurrection, judgment, eternal life. And the big piece I really wanted to emphasize is that whenever the Bible talks about these topics, they always do so with the goal. The reason for doing it is to say, therefore, live this way. There's always an exhortation of how to live. And so for those, it was things like, don't be alarmed, the world's going to go crazy. Don't be deceived, because that deception is coming, and live like you're going to give account for your life. Live knowing that judgment's coming, that eternity is coming, and invest in that stuff. So anticipate, be ready, and live. So that's the basic point of the sermon.
Is it fair? And I think about this occasionally. I don't want to say I think about it a lot, but I think about it occasionally. That folks are trying to extract every bit they can out of that because they're anxious, because they or something like that, as opposed to understanding, hey, this is going to happen, and therefore let's do this. It feels like they're missing, that they're getting the forest for the trees kind of thing.
1 second.
Oh, sure. Anyway, so where we were kind of going was, people seem to be so focused on trying to understand what the circumstances are so they can predict when it's going to happen, and not on kind of what it sounds like the essence of it, which is, this is going to happen, and therefore here is how you should live. Yeah.
I think as I reflect on the people who I've talked to who are very passionate about this, I don't know if that I want to really guess at their motivation. I think that's a question for them to ask, but they do seem to be, most of the people I hear, they're very concerned about getting the details right, and not as concerned about, well, what does that mean for how I need to be living? Which is the emphasis that the writers always have. And it's debatable. If we can be really honest for a minute, there is more arguments within the Christian community over end time stuff than anything else. There just is. And there's a reason for that, is because God didn't make it super duper clear. He just didn't. And maybe there's a reason for that, so that the enemy wouldn't know exactly what he's going to do and when he's going to do it. Prophecy's often that way. It makes sense looking back on it, like, well, obviously Jesus had to be the suffering servant, but before he did that, it was really hard to tell. Did I answer your question?
I'm
not sure if I did.
No, you did. Because when I hear about the debates, and I have to go, am I naive or am I missing something? Because this is a debate that I don't care about. I know that sounds a bit blunt, but do I care that he's coming back? Yes. Is it important for me to understand all the circumstances around it? Not to me. And I could be missing, like I said, I could be missing something significant. It's just not a debate that I feel passionate about. It's like, is it this or is it this or
Okay.
is it this? And so like sometimes when you're like, well, is it going to, I can't even tell you what people are arguing about on that. So there's a part of me that goes, I'm naive, or I'm ill-informed. Should I care more, I
And
guess?
what I would say maybe.
Okay.
I would say maybe. Um, if you're going to be a serious student of the word, which I know you want to be, it's worthwhile knowing the positions and the arguments of it. To know what people mean by premillennial versus post-millennial versus amillennial, knowing what pre-trib is, it's helpful to understand that stuff because they are seriously trying to understand what the scripture has to say, and that's always a good thing. And I'm not saying, so there's this, and then the second thought is there are some people, and I don't know if that's you or not, but there are some people who actively avoid the subject because it's either scary or they just aren't eternity minded. They're focused on today.
Right.
And that piece, that's not thinking like God does. Jesus is very much continuously making people, trying to get people to think beyond the now, beyond today. Think about what's going to happen afterwards. Invest in eternity. And so the teaching on the end times is actually relatively frequent. It's just they don't put the pieces together in a clear timeline, if that makes sense. So most of the books, I'm trying to think, there's at least several of the books in the New Testament make a pretty strong point of you need to live this way because of, and then they list some end time point, because of Second Peter, the world's going to burn up, all this stuff. You need to live that way. So there is a clear emphasis on end time stuff. What's not there is a clear timeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I suppose as I think about it, I get more focused on that first part. You should live this way because so the because part, I don't feel like I'm not passionate about parsing that. It's here's how you should live. Here are the things that should be important to you, and the consequence, or like literally the things that come next in sequence, aren't as important to me as here's what I want you to do. Here's how I want you to engage with people, and
right.
And
I think that's fine. I think generally speaking, that's where we need to be. I think it would be, there's a clear teaching there, even in Matthew 24:25 of you need to be anticipating it. You need to be living your life knowing that this is going to occur. In light of that you're on, you're driving to Disneyland, that's coming. But if you only think about Disneyland, then you're going to hit the car in front of you.
Right.
You got to remember how to make a wrong turn or something like that. So
yeah, and I was thinking about driving as well as an analogy, because I was thinking about people. Somebody pulled out in front of us the other day as we were driving home from the airport, and it's because the issue was they were going too slowly. Right? They're so concerned about the accident that could happen that they weren't focused on how they were functioning currently, which one could almost argue, well, you're just thinking about today. Well, no, I mean, I know what the long game is. I also need to get from here, A to B. And if we understand where we're going, then the smaller steps in between will be defined by that. Like, you're going to Disneyland, you're going to take a specific route because you want to get there. Right. You still have to turn left here. You're still going to have to understand where you're getting lunch.
Yes.
And things like, I'm killing the analogy there, but.
Right. And and there are Christians who get so obsessed about end time stuff that they stop thinking about now. They stop, you know, doing things like, okay, but he wants you to make sure you're loving your neighbors, sharing the gospel, or just paying your bills. I mean, just all of that stuff. And one of the parables, I suppose you could call it, in Matthew 24:25 was, is Jesus going to find you doing what you're supposed to be doing?
Right.
You need to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. So do it.
So as you walked away Sunday, and I know you had some conversations with folks, and I don't even know what the topics specifically were on there, but what did you come away going, I wish I had a little more time to elaborate on this subject, or something that Kathy brought up?
Kathy rarely brings things up. She does sometimes. Let me tell you two things. One was talking to Johnny, who said, the older I get, the more it just needs to be simple, and we need to not argue about details. We need, how do we live? Mm-hmm. And Johnny always amazes me on how down to earth she is, and how well rounded spiritually she is. The other thing, I wish I would have preached it differently. I wish I would have taken that exhortations thing and summarized the point of, like, the fig tree, just with a couple of words, and it said, this is what it means. And then I could have just summarized it different. Did you have some feedback?
I haven't talked to people. No, nobody talked to me about it, but which doesn't mean anything, really. It's I find that it's kind of this overall picture that concerns me about Christianity today, that we're so wrapped up in the minutia that we forget the overall picture. What are we called to do at the larger level? Can we accomplish that? And then we can, and I say that recognizing that when you study Scripture, it's so much more satisfying to take a deep dive and to understand what the language was, what the original intent, what was the context, right? Mm-hmm. To understand that, and occasionally come out and go, so how are you engaging with people who don't believe? How are you reaching people? And that's a lot of what I got out of that message was, come up for air, buddy. Look at the people around you, and are you living this way, and are you helping other people live this way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had two thoughts in there. Now that I think about it, there is one thing I would have said more bluntly or clearly. But one of the things I think people miss, and you're getting at this, is just, I'm going to say it differently, but the similar idea is that so often when we think I'm studying the Bible, I'm trying to do everything right, and what we miss is the contours, the emphasis of stuff. It's like, how often is a topic talked about? How is it talked about? Not just what is said, but how often does Jesus talk about idolatry versus, like, say, sexual sin versus other things? It's like, so part of what it means to be a biblical Christian is that the overall patterns of thought are the same, as well as the details. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
And so what is Jesus' main emphasis? Things like, love people, talk to them about me. Those are huge emphasis versus things like politics.
Right. I assume you've read To Kill a Mockingbird.
I've seen the movie.
Oh, no. Okay, I'm going to lose you here. Okay. It's a book I've read a few times. twice because I wanted to and once because I had to. When my sophomore high school English teacher in high school was explaining what the book was about, she's like, it's a story about how a girl's brother broke his arm, which in a literal sense, that's the inciting part of the book. But it's really not about that. It's about racial inequality and, depersonalizing or, removing, right? I mean, these themes are huge. And so when I think about how some people read the Bible, they see it and go, oh, it's about how this kid broke his arm. Well, no, it's not. I mean, I know that's kind of, you can infer that because that's kind of surface level what you've got. But there's a theme, these overarching themes that are in here that rise to the top because we keep touching on them. We keep coming back to them. Sure, he broke his arm. And sure, we're explaining how that happened. Yes, Jesus died and he rose again. And here's all these other things that are very important in here thematically. And that's kind of where I'm at. Is like, I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in what it literally says in this particular translation, which we went into last week a little bit about the nature of translations, that we forget, what's this? Pictures. What's the overall theme here?
Yeah.
So I think and I struggle with that just as much as anybody.
And in a certain sense, I think, well, they're interrelated, but in a certain sense, that's much more challenging and much more impactful. And I try to, it's certainly mindful of that often when I'm preaching, is trying to keep the big picture in front of people, the patterns of thinking about stuff, and not just the details. Because it's easy to be, just a super dive on a detail. And sometimes it's good, but yeah. The other thing I wanted to communicate that I wish I would have communicated more on was a little bit of a rebuke to us Christians in America that are so worried and wrapped up in cultural trends and politics not going our way or going our way, and don't be alarmed at this stuff. Don't be distressed. Don't be all worked up over it. Expect it. And don't put hope into that, because the big picture. You know where it's going. And so I think that's part of those big picture thematic themes you got to get in your head and not lose sight of.
Yeah, I love that. Do you remember Brian Duncan? He was a relatively popular, well, he's still around, but Christian singer, songwriter.
I think so.
Yeah, early 90s kind of singer. He did a song called Traces of Heaven, and he just reminded me of it. I learned a lesson, I learned it well. Life don't get easier in the long run. And he's just talking about how life's been hard. He had a really difficult year. And just because your faith is in Jesus doesn't mean all of a sudden, and we talked about this on Sunday, doesn't mean that things all of a sudden get easier or that people treat you better or that you're not gonna suffer persecution. That if you accept some of these things, then you can adjust the way you interact with those circumstances better than to throw up your hands and go, I can't believe how unfair this is. Why am I having to suffer this?
Yeah, which in a sense makes me think back to what we've talked about with things like peace and joy. It's your perspective on the circumstances. It's how you interpret what's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that. It's been a hard year, and you know this, and Christmas was not easy for me.
Yeah.
It's such a fight to go, okay, I know that how I'm reading the circumstances right now are not necessarily accurate, or that there's a better or a different way I could be seeing this. That's hard to go, okay, I know I could see it differently and I would be doing better, oh, but that's hard to do at this moment.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that like Vanessa, my wife, is really good at. People know who Vanessa is, it's okay to acknowledge that things are hard.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, and there's a difference between acknowledging that things are difficult and wallowing in them. And I
Or
think
being
sometimes,
swallowed by them.
right. There's definitely times, where I have to just take a pause and cry, or just put my head in my hands and just go, this is hard. And I process that a bit and I go, oh, I'm glad I did that. Now I can kind of continue with my day. And it doesn't mean that the thing disappeared or anything, but it's just kind of the nature of life and the nature of grief, that you're going to get hit with things. You're going to process them, and you're going to move forward, hopefully feeling better about that. And I know that the valleys that I've experienced have prepared me for the dips that occur in the future. Because, those continue to give us the perspective that's like, oh, this isn't that bad. I think the thing that we really lack is the perspective on the joy that we will experience in the next life. Because if we understood that, then it would make some of these things seem pretty minor in comparison. It's easy to say, much less easy to contend with.
Yeah. And Paul said something similar, that the eternal weight of glory that we will be given far outweighs our momentary troubles.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
Well, anything else you
do
want
you
to
have
share?
any questions about end time stuff? I mean, I know it was about.
I feel like I need to develop a hunger for knowing more about the end time stuff. I haven't developed that yet. And maybe that's something for me to consider as this is the last episode of the year. Only our third episode, but it's the last episode of the year. And, I will be, I heard something from you on Sunday as you were talking to, I think her name was Kylie, that spending more time in the Gospels, as I consider like my Bible reading plan, maybe I don't need to do the whole Bible. Maybe I can do a couple of turns, maybe 3 turns through the New Testament instead, and spend a little more time with that. Having gone through the New Testament 8 or 9 times in the past 10 years, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 times. Leviticus is a grind, man.
Well, the good, what I would love for people to get to the places where you can see the metaphors that are being communicated there. But yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're at 30 minutes, which is the time that we tell ourselves that we will quit because people stop watching.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I just leave folks with a couple of words, and I have them written over here. But we definitely want, after you've watched the service, if you have any questions about that, please send those to office@opendoorcommunity.cc. We will address those questions as they are appropriate to do during our weekly discussion. So if there's something that was confusing, something that you wish we would have spent more time on Sunday, that we'd love to have the opportunity to address those. If you have questions about who we are, about Open Door Community Church, what we believe, if you need prayer, if there's a worship song you'd like me to sing during this, no, that's not happening. But anyway, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. They got plenty of time to listen to that. Otherwise, what any parting words that you have for our folks who are listening or watching?
I just want to encourage people that 2021, whether it's better or worse than 2020, which has been a dumpster fire, Jesus is coming back. Expect it. I mean, that was the point. Expect this. Don't be alarmed. Be on your guard, because there are things that are going to come down the pike that are going to be strongly try to lead you astray. So know your Bible, listen to good Bible teachers, live for eternity. Live now, but live for eternity. So,
thank you, sir.
All right.
Everybody,
all right.
Have a good week. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.